Wanna learn Krita for pixel art? The basics? Hey, it's free, let's go! This video came quite long, so I divided it into parts. In the first part we will check the UI, the basic setup for pixel art, some basic tools, and we will paint a small cactus. On the second part we will paint this house with a lake, and I have planned in the future to make tutorials on isometric view, top-down view, and so on. So let's start. To get Krita, head over krita.org. The link is in the description. And download Krita using this button. While you download and install Krita, grab your favorite drawing tablet if you have one, or paint with a mouse. You know, sometimes painting with a mouse feels like a painting with a rock, and you might feel a little bit like a caveman. I sometimes use mouse too. For example, when the stylus is out of reach. With pixel art, the brush opacity settings and such are not that important as in digital art in generally. So if you don't have drawing tablet, mouse will do. But I totally recommend you to get drawing tablet in the future. They are not actually that expensive anymore. So at the beginning, go to the top left, File New, go to the predefined and just choose Pixel. You can change the image sizes and everything here if you feel like it, but for the beginning, this will work just fine. To start, hit Create, and then you're welcome with this, the Krita basic UI. If this is the first time, you will start thinking, what is this, and all this? And now you're totally confused. Maybe you want already shut it down. But hey, just don't give up yet. It's actually not that hard if you chunk the UI into small pieces, so it's way easier to learn and know what is going on. There is actually only 5 main areas in Krita UI: the file menu, toolbar, dockers, status bar, and the canvas, where you can paint if you know how to paint. And if you don't know how to paint, well, paint anyway. So let's go through these UI elements one by one. Let's check the file menu first. This menu at the top is what you find pretty much in any software. You have the basic file stuff like open, save, quit. At the edit, you have the undo, redo, paste setups. View has setup for the canvas. You can enable rulers, guides, and grids. At the image, you have the image properties. Here you can scale options for image size, canvas size, trimming, and such. The layer tab is for layer setups. Then there's the setups for selections. And then this filter setup, where you can apply different filters for the image, adjust the image colors, curves, color balances, and all that. The tools are for Python scripts, and the plugins, for these you can ignore for now. At the settings, you will find the configurations for Krita, and you can find all the dockers. I know this is pretty fast, but I totally recommend that you check all these options one by one and see what Krita has to offer. The next UI element below the file menu is called Toolbar. The toolbar can be customized at the Krita settings however you want. By default, it has buttons for new file, open, save, the gradient setup, pattern, foreground, background color, brush engine, and the brush options. The last few buttons are horizontal, mirror, tool, and the vertical. And finally, one of the most important UI elements in Krita, the dockers. So these are dockers. They are like sub windows in Krita that has all of these brush presets, layers, tool options, all the tools. And there's lots of different dockers, and you can find them here. Some really useful dockers are grid and guides if you're making tile sets, and the overview, where you can see the whole scenery in smaller window. For dockers, you can reorder them. You can grab these, scale them, move them around, and place them pretty much wherever you want. And also you can regroup them together. Or even leave them as floating if you prefer. And if your workspace gets ever messed up, you can reset them by choosing Window, Workspace, and Default. And at the bottom you have the status bar. At the first button you can choose the masking mode of your selection. The next one you can see the brush preset. Then you have the color space, image size, and some rotation and zoom controls. And that's it. So that's enough for the UI. So let's set up the UI for basic pixel art. The one docker I recommend you open is the palette. Drag it over here. click this icon and you can choose different palette. This one works pretty fine at the start, and of course you can make your own or import others if you prefer. The next one is the advanced color selector, and I prefer to change the triangle to square. I think it's better to have more space to choose the colors. The tool option docker is really important, has always the setups for every tool, and I like to set up it over here at the top. For the process, we are making pixel art, so you can change the preset to the pixel art process. Also for the pop-up palette, you can change the preset process. Right click on the canvas, click this icon, and choose the pixel art process here. If you want more in-depth settings for the pop-up palette, you can find it from the Krita configuration in here. And here you can find the color selector, which is triangle, and I prefer to change it to the square. The pop-up palette is quite handy tool. You have all those rotation, zoom, and the brush and the color settings here, so I use it quite often. One thing that annoys me in Krita is the pixel art grid. If you zoom in, it will display this white grid over your canvas. I always turn it off. You can turn it off by going settings, configure Krita, display, canvas decorations, and set the start showing at into 9999 and hit OK. So now we have the Krita set up pretty much for basic pixel art. Now you should save the workspace, so you can always go back to it in the future. Going window, workspace, and new workspace. Set the name you want and hit OK. I recommend you go and check these different workspaces that they're saved for animation, different painting modes, and you can always go back to the one you just saved. So now we can start checking the basic tools at the toolbox at the left side, but first create a new painting layer by hitting this plus icon. The first tools at the toolbox are for vector art. These are select shape tool for selecting vector objects, text tools to make a text, calligraphy, paint in vector mode, and edit shapes, where you can edit the vector points and the Bezier curves. And keep in mind, if you use these, you need to create a vector layer for these. But our goal is to make pixel art, so choose the brush or hit B key, and you can start paint. So the basic movement in the canvas, if you hold space, you can pan. Holding Ctrl with space is zoom, Ctrl Alt space is with snapping, and if you want rotate, it's Shift and space, and if you want with snapping, it's with Shift Alt and space. And when you're painting, good shortcut is E, that is eraser, so it uses the same preset that you have selected. So for example, if you use tether brush and you hit erase, it uses the same. The most common tools making pixel art is the brush tool that is not selected. Also the line tool, which is goo. You can make lines. The rectangle tool is really useful also. And I recommend that you check the dockers here and have the tool options docker selected. So for example, if you paint now, you can check the fill. I never use the fill color by default. If I want to fill the inside interior with some color, I just use the paint bucket tool. It gives you more control that way. Ellipse tool is pretty much the same. The ellipse tool I don't use so much because the Krita don't have the pixel perfect, so it's not making the circle exactly like I want. And usually I paint this by hand. Also you have the polygonal tool that you can paint lines, and when you close it makes shapes with that. This is pretty much the same, but it doesn't close the shape. The Bezier curve tool, I think more useful in vector graphics, but you can make like soft lines or curved lines with that. The freehand path tool makes the curve smoother when you're drawing line. I pretty much never use. Dynamic brush tool. This is pretty hard to see in the video, but it adds weight when you are drawing. So for digital art, you can make more smoother lines. This is really good for digital art, but for pixel art, I never used too much. The multi-brush tool makes these lines, and I don't know, you can make some shapes if you want, or maybe some decoration. The next three are transform selection or layer tool, move layer, and crop tool. First, the transform selection, shortcut Ctrl T with this tool. You can also move and rescale the selection, or if you don't have selection, it will move the whole layer. Using this tool, check the tool options and choose nearest neighbors filter, so you won't get the blurry edges when making transforms. The next one is move layer tool, shortcut T, and it just always moves the whole layer. The last one is the crop tool, shortcut C, where you can choose area and crop your image to smaller size. Choose the area and hit enter, and Ctrl C to undo. The gradient tool, and you can change the setups over here. And you have different gradients which you can choose over there. This one is the color picker. You can choose different colors. And if you're using the brush tool, the shortcut is Control, which I use more often. The most common tools I use is the fill bucket tool. And for example, let's take a rectangle selection. So you can fill the color, the selection. Also works with the brush. And like always, you can check the setups here if you have some issues with the sizing or it's blurry. You can check the different things here. For example, anti-aliasing is good to take off. The selection tools I use often. The rectangle selection is self-explanatory. So you can make selections holding shift. You can add selection. Holding shift and control, you will keep the ratio of the selection. And alt is to remove the selection from previous selections. The ellipse selection, pretty obvious. Again, this one I don't use too much either, because it doesn't make the pixel perfect circles. That actually came pretty good, but anyway, well, you can see in the corner there's slightly wrong. Then there's the polygonal selection tool. This works pretty much the same as the shape tools, but it's for the selections. And here you can see that it's anti-aliased. So remember, again, use the tool options and check the anti-aliasing off, so you will have sharper edge. The continuation selection tool is like magic wand in Photoshop. Chooses the color and you can play with the threshold and the spread. Similar color selection tool, really useful. So let's say you have this blue here. So choose only that. So let's put this in the same layer. So it takes the color from the shape. And Bezier selection tool, yeah, well, for pixel art I never pretty much use. The magnetic curve selection tool maybe you might find useful. It's trying to get the color and use the shape from that. Mostly I use the rectangle. Maybe the freehand selection tool is really useful. That, and if you have anti-aliasing, remember you can take it off here. The last two buttons are zoom and pan. I prefer use personally the shortcuts we went through in the beginning of this video. And last few tips I would like to give with the brushes. So I like sometimes to resize the brush to make it bigger to paint. And you can change it here. Also, if you press shift and hold the mouse button or your stylus, you can resize it faster. And for me, the shortcut is Ctrl+1. That resets to the factory default the brush. So that's a fast way to go back. And if you don't have that, you can check it from here. Keyboard shortcut. And you can change the shortcut pressing here. For me, it's Ctrl+1. So at the start, make a new painting layer if you don't have already. Choose a black color and let's make the base with the line tool. The rectangle tool is really good to make the pot for the cactus. Let's adjust it a little bit with the rectangle select tool. Let's make these corners slightly smooth. And let's adjust the size a little bit here. For the cactus itself, we can use this horizontal mirror tool, so we don't have to paint 2 times. Let's make this smoother too. And take off the mirroring tool, and we can move these to add some variation. Let's add some color with the fill tool, so choose this dark brownish color, and some green for the cactus, and we can start painting with the brush tool. Tweaking the size here a little bit. And let's add some details by adding highlights with some lighter green color. I'm always tweaking the size with the transform tool. And then let's add some shadow detail with the brush tool. So let's open the overview docker to see slightly better the whole image. It gives you a better idea, for example, where add some details. I really don't have any tips in here. Generally, I just paint and add details, fix the shapes where it seems to be lacking. Let's add some highlights, like where the light would hit the cactus. Thinking a little bit like in 3D. let's add some random detail, the spikes and such. Zooming back is really good idea too. Here I noticed that the center part is too small. I box select it and move it slightly up, and then fill the empty spaces with color. And then just adding detail here and there. For the background, I choose the background layer and then box select and then just fill this with colors from the color palette and add some more lighter colors in the center behind the cactus. And use the detail brush to add some details. Normally I don't use the detail brush. I just like to make the details with the 1 pixel brush, but for demonstration purpose, why not? And here's one trick: you can make frame of the border of the image. I took the continuation selection tool, choose the gray background, and hold Ctrl+Shift+I to inverse the selection, so you get only the painted frame. And then you can go to the select menu and use border selection and choose 1 pixel. And you get the frame. And then you can choose black color and just fill the selection area. And finally you can recolor the outline and choosing from the paint layer the black color of the outline, and you can start adding some variation to the outline. I like to have slightly more color in the top part of the cactus. Finally you can crop the image with the crop tool, and I decided to smooth out the colors by reducing the opacity slightly and choosing color and making some color blending with that. Finally, when you're finished and you want to save the image, most likely you want to show it to somebody, and to avoid the blurry edges you should scale it bigger, maybe about 5 times at least. So go to the image, scale image to new size, use the nearest neighbor filter, change the dimension to percentage, put 500, and that should do. And finally save the image as PNG, and you can share it to your friends and neighbors and so on. And the painting is done. So that should cover pretty much the basics of the UI and the tools which I use to paint in Krita. I know we didn't cover everything in Krita, and almost most of the time I use just these tools. And this video is getting quite long already. In the next video we will be painting the house scenery, so you will get better understanding of the tools used in this video and maybe the shortcuts. Anyway, meanwhile I recommend you start painting and have some fun. If you have any comments, critiques or something you would like to learn, please let me know and leave me a comment. Until then, cheers!